I call David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and was pleased to take a call to the tariff-free trade agreement between New Zealand and the Republic of Korea Amendment Bill. And remember, this is not the treaty itself, this is the legislation we need to put through in order for this free trade agreement to come into force. Sir, I want to just pick up a couple of points that have been made earlier, and I want to start rather unusually with where Tim Grosser left last when he was speaking before, which was to look at what we miss out on if we don't enter into these free trade agreements. Because it's quite one thing to say we shouldn't be part of a free trade agreement with Korea because it's not the perfect free trade agreement. And it's not the perfect free trade agreement. It's a very good one, but it's certainly not the perfect one. But the point is, what do you miss out? And let's take a good look at some of those things that we would miss out. So 45% tariff would not come off kiwi fruit over a period of 6 years. Now, if I was an MP residing in Tauranga, for example, or around the Bay of Plenty, I would have thought that was a pretty important sort of thing to get through for the farmers in Tauranga. Or if I happen to be the MP for Northland, where a lot of kiwi fruit are growing up there as well, I would have thought that was a pretty important tariff to have removed so that those kiwi fruit farmers are able to sell their kiwi fruit into Korea without having to pay a 45% tariff. That means that the price doesn't have to be discounted at the expense of the farmer, but over the period of 6 years, effectively, profit will increase. But there's a second important point, because without that tariff going down, it would mean that we would not be able to compete with Chile. And Chile has had an agreement with Korea for a long time, and Chile is able to sell its kiwi fruit, an inferior product, into Korea and undercut New Zealand producers. So if we don't have this free trade agreement, those farmers in those areas will miss out on that funding. And that is particularly important, I would suggest, Mr Tabato, if you happen to be living in the Bay of Plenty area, or you happen to be the MP for Northland, which your leader is. So that's the first thing I'll say. Second thing, butter. The tariff goes off that. 89% of the tariff goes off that over 10 years. That's an immediate benefit to dairy farmers throughout New Zealand. 36% off cheese, 10% off wood products, 20% off salmon, and we can go on and on. And if you had the industry representatives that came and met before our select committee, you would hear from them that this has meant millions of dollars to those producers that will flow through their industry and benefit thousands, or in many cases 100,000 workers directly for that. So it's not the perfect agreement, sir, but it's certainly a very good one. There are some problems, and that's been referred to. Milk powder, for example, though some dairy products, cheese and butter, the tariff rate will fall. On milk products, it isn't as good as we would like, and likewise with frozen deer velvet and with some seafood products. And why is that? I mean, this is a pretty difficult free trade agreement to negotiate, and I want to acknowledge some of those negotiators that are here in the Parliament with us, in the House with us tonight. But when you add up the benefits to New Zealand, let's see why it's so difficult. Let's give us a sort of an indication, because what does Korea get out of this free trade agreement? Well, we are the 41st most important trading partner for Korea, the 41st. Not exactly what you would call, in the top 10. For us, Korea is the 5th most important trading partner, more important than the UK, for example, for the United Kingdom now. And Korea is a fast developing country. It is just below us in the GDP rankings, but looks set to overtake us in the coming years. So what does Korea get out of this? Well, it gets a tariff reduction on Korean goods coming into New Zealand of $4.5 million. $4.5 million it gets in savings. How much does New Zealand get? Well, New Zealand gets $229 million. And you look at that and you weigh it up and you think, Mr Chair,
Don't cheer it.
you look at that up and you're looking at that and you think, who's getting the better deal here? Well, there's no doubt who's getting the better deal. New Zealand's getting the better deal, and that might perhaps hint at why this free trade agreement was a little more complicated to get through and a little more difficult, quite apart from the Koreans who are particularly, I don't want to use the word obstinate, but certainly difficult to deal with when you are conducting these negotiations. So the balance for us, the balance of benefits, is firmly on the side of New Zealand. And I think it's partly because we are a leader in free trade agreements and we are a strong proponent of free trade that we were able to hold some of the moral high ground when it came to negotiating this particular agreement. So, sir, this is very important to New Zealand and it's very important to us. There are some issues that have been mentioned, and I want to touch on those as well that I think are issues, and one of those refers to property rights. And this was raised by Professor Kafaru from Auckland University, who is one of New Zealand's experts in free trade agreements, and she pointed out that under this free trade agreement it will be very difficult for us to be able to stop basically the foreigners coming in and buying residential land up if we chose to regulate that. And I think that's an issue that we need to be very cognizant about, and it opens it up under the most favoured nation status to other countries as well that we might have deals with. And lastly, sir, I want to mention the ISDS, because I think we have to put this in perspective. We have never been taken to a tribunal. We have never been taken in front of the WTO. The bar for this is incredibly high, as was just pointed out by Dr. Retty. This is an aspect of the free trade agreement with Korea that is highly unlikely to come into play, because Korea has very good judicial institutions, and so does New Zealand. It would be likely that if there was any disagreement, it would be played out within the respective courts of either New Zealand or Korea. Highly unlikely that it would end up in an ISDS tribunal. And even if it did, the chances of us losing that agreement are very, very low. 84% of all cases taken against an OECD country have found in favour of the nation rather than in a private corporation. Sir, I just want to say in conclusion, there are some issues around free trade agreements, and certainly as we look at the possibility of the TPPA being signed. But we must try and keep these in perspective in terms of the risks and of the benefits and of the foregone risks if we do not enter these free trade agreements to those producers and the manufacturers in New Zealand that will not gain access to markets and as a result will not add to the prosperity of New Zealand. I do think there needs to be a much better and more informed debate in New Zealand about free trade agreements. I do believe that it's largely the fault of the government for not exciting and certainly promoting that debate. I wish they could do more, because we definitely need it when we hear the rather ill-informed comments and debate that we're hearing now, albeit with the greatest intent and certainly the wish that they do the best for New Zealand. But I do think we need to have some balance in that debate. So with that, I would just like to conclude my speech this evening, and just by saying that this free trade agreement will go through tonight. As a result of that, there will be effectively a double whammy of 2 years added together, and as a result of that, a lot of producers around New Zealand will be a lot better off, as will a lot of New Zealanders. Thank you.